to drive systemic change. In my day job, I serve as director for CPS Strong at the University of Cincinnati, where I lead the work to increase the enrollment, retention, and graduation of Cincinnati public school graduates attending the University of Cincinnati. And I'm also a proud graduate of CPS myself. This evening, School Board School is hosting this event in partnership with Women's City Club of Greater Cincinnati, Ohio Student Activists Alliance, Greater Cincinnati Voter Collaborative, Community Matters, and the Urban League of Southwest Ohio. We want to thank our co-hosts for partnering with us on this forum. Our goal for this forum is for you all, the CPS voters, to learn more about each candidate and their views on some of the most pressing issues facing our district. In connection with this forum, we will also have a candidate guide where each candidate has shared their thoughts on some key issues. You can check out our website to read or download the guide. We'll chat in the link now. Remember, you can vote for up to 3 candidates in this election. Tonight, we will cover a range of topics, and we are excited to hear from each candidate. We've invited all 5 candidates in this year's CPS school board race and followed up at least 3 times with anyone who did not respond to our invitation. Maya will bring all the candidates into view, and then I'll introduce them. Thank you, Maya. The 5 candidates in this year's CPS school board race in alphabetical order are Eve Bolton, Bryan Cannon, Ben Lindy, Kendra Mapp. Paul Schiele did not respond to our invitation, so he will not be joining us tonight. For tonight's forum, we have a set of questions, and each candidate will answer every question. They will have up to 2 minutes to respond to each question, except the last question, where everyone has 1 minute. We only have an hour together, and we want to make sure we get through all of our questions, and so we will stop candidates when their time is up. While I read the question, it will also be shared on the screen with the order in which candidates will be asked to respond. We'll also post the question and order in the chat. So with that, let's begin. Question 1. By definition, school board members are supposed to be representatives of the community or the voice of the constituents. How will you engage with the community to make sure the decisions you make are representative of those most impacted by a decision? We will begin with you, Eve, first. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. First and foremost, the way that we engage the community is by conducting the public work in public, and that is through our formal efforts and scheduled efforts, be they committee or be they full board or be they engagement. Whatever it may be, beyond those sorts of things, what we have to be able to do and count on is actual formalized engagement in separate opportunities as focused as possible when needed, but generally also getting the strongest, broadest band of representation possible. And I think we've been improving that effort over the last year, very much so. So both public as scheduled and structured, and also focused and broad, be they with survey, be they through conversation, be they through focus targets, as we did with our transportation efforts. So it varies, but I think the most important thing is the public business must be done in public. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Bryan, you're up next.
In addition to the school board meetings, the formal ways that you can engage parents in the community, I think you have to think outside the box now. You have parents who are working multiple jobs, different shifts, so you have to kind of meet them where they are. I would do something that I've already started doing, which is actually a town hall meeting on social media, where people can log on, ask questions, and engage that way. I would use the social media platforms to keep parents updated and allow them to respond when they have the opportunity to actually respond. I love the coffee chats or the opportunities to have small groups of parents in various settings. For example, utilizing sports and extracurricular activities to have an opportunity to address all of the attendees at those venues. Also by attending PTA meetings, school events. You can always be a listening ear to parents when you meet them where they are, and in most times they come up to the school for various or different events. In addition to that, one of the things that I'm used to doing is getting like a 360 survey done from parents, teachers, and students so that all the information can come together and we can improve the district.
Great, thank you, Bryan. Next up, Ben.
Thanks, Dr. Wright. And it's a great question. I think when I joined the school board in 2020, I think one of the hardest things for me to figure out, and this is still challenging, is, what is the perspective that represents a majority of families? And I think it's hard for me often to distinguish, are the emails we're getting in our inbox or the people who are coming to hearing of the public at board meetings, is this truly representative of where a majority of families are? Or is this just a very highly organized minority position? This was particularly hard during COVID, when people had very strong opinions about what we should be doing, and it was hard to know, what is the perspective that would do right by the most number of families. So one of the things I did in my first term that I'm really proud of, and it's actually how I met Kendra, was starting a parent cabinet, and we meet once a quarter. And it's designed to get two-way communication, I think, to hear from families what are the issues that are highest priority for you, but then also for me to share, here are some things I'm thinking we should be doing as a district. What do you think about that? And so I've gotten a lot of value out of that group, and I really appreciate it a lot. I would just mention two other things quickly. I'm watching my time. When we chose the superintendent and when we set the top goals and priorities for the district, which I think are two of the most important things a school board can do, we did extensive community engagement with thousands of stakeholders. And that included surveys and focus groups and one-on-one conversations. Some of the folks in this meeting were part of those. So I just say that the parent and family cabinet for sure, and then on these big decisions the board makes, some more comprehensive engagement. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ben. Next up, Kendra.
Thank you. I really appreciate this question because I do value engagement. And so I'm going to take a different approach in terms of how I view engagement. And so one of the things that I think is critical is making sure that there is initial alignment, right? That all constituents understand the vision and the mission and the goals of the district, because that will help to allow that buy-in where everyone knows what we're working on and what we're working towards. Another area of focus for engagement is recognizing that this requires a transformative experience versus transactional. And so when we honor that, we're focusing on making sure that there's rapport, there's mutual respect, there's trust, there's authenticity, because again, that helps with that reciprocity and people believe and recognize that they are seen and they feel valued. And so ultimately, I would take those approaches and from there, then do an internal audit of whose voices are at the table. Because as Ben spoke about, being a parent, I recognize that attending several of those conversations that we had parents at the table, yet there were similar voices, right? And it did not always cover the wide span of students and families and teachers from our strong district. And so I was always one to advocate for those additional voices to be at the table. So I would do an internal audit. We know that we have the formal modalities of attending the board meetings, hosting town halls. All of those things are really great and imperative, but I believe that it is essential that we have to ensure that our students, our partners, our teachers our families feel safe and feel comfortable to elevate their voice. And so those are the areas that I would want to lean into to make sure we are fostering healthy engagement.
Great. Thank you so much, Kendra. Question 2. Two minutes, and I understand, I see a lot of activity in the chat. There is an echo, so it may be a little bit difficult to understand our candidates. All of us are unmuted, and so there could be some feedback because of that. So please bear with us. But Bryan, you're up first with this next question.
Okay, so I want to say thank you to the people who created this equity policy in 2016. It was a pretty comprehensive policy that sounded very good. One of the things that I would like to do is to make sure that that policy has legs and that it is actually seen in the schools by students receiving what they need to be successful. And now to answer your question, if those bills pass, what should we do? We are in the business of protecting children. And so it is important that as a board, we stand firm, and as a district that we stand firm that we will continue to put children first. That's one of my mottos, kids first, making sure that those decisions that the politicians have made do not make it down to our schools. We have to fight those things. We cannot have our LGBT students ostracized, outed. We can't have that. We need to make sure that we protect our kids by making sure that we can stand against those policies if they were to pass. But before that even happens, we have to fight now. We have to fight and legislate and get out there and canvass and make sure that people know what is on the ballot and how we can actually affect change.
Great. Thank you, Bryan. Next up is Ben Lindy.
Thank you. This is a real challenge for us in CPS because this is just not a hypothetical situation, because this has genuinely happened to us in the last couple of years. And I would say 3 things. First, I think we can be clear about what our values are in the resolutions that we pass. So I can think of specific times when Columbus was debating bills like an Ohio version of Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, where we passed a resolution that I introduced, asking, basically sharing our strenuous objection to the values of that bill in contrast to the policies we passed as a district. Now that is not unimportant, right? Like, I think it is important to be public to what our values are. At the same time, a resolution is not going to change what a state law is once it's passed. And Ms. Bolton, I'm sure could share many examples of how the choices made in Columbus are enormously problematic for CPS. And so what else can we do? So I'll offer 2 other ideas. The second is, I think we can sue, or we can support groups who are suing. Because I think some of this madness coming out of Columbus violates basic constitutional rights. And I think we should challenge that. I think we should challenge that in court. And then third, let's say we've passed the resolutions, we've done everything we can do in the courts. I think the third thing is, there are unjust laws, and there have been a long history of unjust laws in our country and around the world. And sometimes what you do with an unjust law is you break it. And so I think that depending on what the situation is, I would challenge Columbus to come enforce that in our district. Now I'm sure that there are that will be challenging, but we can talk more about this, but I think there's some fights that are worth having.
Great, thank you, Ben. Kendra?
Yeah, so this question is definitely important, and we recognize that there have been some very harmful and divisive legislations that's trying to be proposed, and ultimately would further marginalize our students, our staff, and our community. So as a district, it is imperative that we fight against these egregious legislations that are trying to be proposed and passed. And for myself, I have a duty, an ethical duty that I have taken as a counselor to do no harm. And so I stand by that and I uphold that. And so what that means for me is making sure that I'm always advocating and establishing those coalitions and working collaboratively with the rest of the board to ensure that we are advocating and elevating our voices, even if that means we're standing alone, right? Always ensuring that we're doing what's right, because we do have a responsibility to protect our students, to protect our families, and to protect our communities. And so our constituents are going to be looking to that, looking at us to be the example, to be the model, to ensure that, again, we are using the leverage that we do have to fight against anything that will be harmful or divisive to our school community. And also, I would like to add is making sure that we're helping educate on ways that we can inform our community, how we can inform everyone to advocate and make sure that they are fighting back against what Columbus is trying to do or send down through state legislation.
Thank you, Kendra. Eve?
Thank you so much. As a person that had something to do with that equity policy, as well as Elisa Hoffman and a number of board members as well, I'm not only proud of it, but I think it's a model. And I think it tells what we should be doing. And we must be willing, as Ben said, to take the state to court. We must be willing to mobilize our families, our students, in opposition to those sorts of laws passed in Columbus that do not represent our values. And I think we are willing to do that. More importantly, I think very strong opinion must be leveled in advocacy on and on and on in an effort to make sure those laws don't get passed. Or if they are passed in one house, they're not passed in two. And if they're passed in two, we have to then go to the governor. And then you have to go to court. And I know this will sound ridiculous for many people, but I've been saying for about a year and a half, we might have to go to jail. And that's the reality, because we do have an oath and an obligation to carry out the laws of this state. But the reality, too, is that our obligation, our moral and ethical obligation, is to our students and their health and well-being, and to the community that elected us and the community that owns these schools. Remember, Columbus has spent a long number of hours trying to take away local control of schools. They did it over several years. They failed. And now this year, they actually succeeded in taking away the power of state school boards that were elected by the people. There's an effort here that is very, very authoritarian and is very, very right of center. And we have to be, how shall I say it, the warriors to preserve local control and local values in our schools.
Thank you, Eve. Thank you, Eve. We're moving on to our next question, question 3. I think we all agree that building a school district where every child can reach their potential is critical to individual student success and the success of our city. So this is a 2-part question. First, what do you see as the one biggest obstacle facing the district in reaching this goal? And second, since we know there are so many people in CPS already working towards this goal, what do you see as one thing the district does really well? We will begin with Ben. You have 2 minutes. And Ben, you are muted. So we're, oh, there we go.
I was saying, I was thanking you for giving me the easy question to go first on. So I appreciate it. You know, on the biggest obstacle front, I think that I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to give you 3, because I think one of them is there's just no substitute for believing in the potential of every single student and believing that it's our job to do right by every single student. And I think that, you know, there are all kinds of places where that is true. I would be lying if I said it's true everywhere. And I think you can't do anything else until you have a shared set of beliefs that every single child deserves excellence, and we can provide that for every single child. So I'll list that as obstacle 1. Obstacles, you know, 2 and 3 are a little bit more technical, but I think students respond to the level and rigor and caliber of the curriculum that we put in front of them. And I think there's been too long where what we have done is put in front of students material that was below the level of rigor that it should have. I think we've done a good job of adopting stronger curriculum in CPS. I think the issue that we need to do now is make sure that every teacher has the support they need to make sure it's being implemented really well. Third, I'm going to speed up because I'm running out of time. I think we can improve and continue to improve as a board. I think the better we get as a board at doing board work and leaving the administrative work to the administration, I think the better the outcomes will be for children. And then to the second part of the question, what does the district do well? There are so many things CPS does well, but I think we have these pockets of excellent schools, our Montessori programs, Walnut Hills High School, SCPA, some of our other programs. We have some pockets of excellence that I think we can be really proud of.
Great, thank you, Ben. Kendra.
So one of the things that I think that the district does really well on is ensuring that there's a continual opportunity to reach out to get constituent feedback and input as it relates to developing, you know, policy or vision or goals. I think that the district has done an exceptional job of trying to be inclusive through several modalities to reflect the views and the values of students, as well as community partners, as well as parents, teachers, staff, all of the above. And I can speak to that because I've had an opportunity to engage in some of those initiatives. And so I think that that is an area that we are really strong, and also establishing community partnerships. I think we have great programming that's in the schools as it relates to working through some of the inequities. One of the things that really stands out to me is making sure, or how the district has made sure that during COVID, every student had access to a one-to-one device for technology. So I think that that is an area that we do really well. However, I would like to see more equity across the district. We do have strong magnet and Montessori programs, but one of the things that's disheartening for me is recognizing that our neighborhood schools are not thriving to the extent and to the level that other schools are. And so when we look at the data, when we look at the level of resources and support that's put into those schools, we recognize that there is an area of deficit. And while I think all of our teachers, I think all of our administrators do a wonderful job, our parents do a wonderful job of being present, we cannot ignore that there is some deficits that we really need to work on, especially as it relates to curriculum, having that rigor, having that level of expectation to do exceptionally well.
Great, thank you, Kendra. Eve.
I think what we do best is finding ways to continue to have incredible community support, frankly, even when we don't earn it. And that's a problem. Our community has to have great expectations of us. One of the other things that we do very well, and history proves it, is that we have, as a district, been one of the most progressive districts, not only in the state, but in the country, for site-based management, for locally created initiatives, whether it's public Montessori or preschool expansion, or whether indeed it's also having now, as has been mentioned most recently in the last several years, a very progressive curriculum that reaches the kind of rigor and the kind of high expectations that we want. The greatest obstacle that we continue to have, as does everyone in a district like ours, is finding a way to overcome the challenges of poverty, and also trying to find a way to overcome any areas of discrimination or worry that people have about sending their children to schools where there is great diversity. Because if indeed we could have greater integration in all of our neighborhood schools, even to the degree that our magnets are more diverse than our neighborhood schools, if we could find a way to actually have integration of class, economic class within our schools, you would see almost overnight the kinds of things that you would want to see in improving what we do. So there's many things to overcome, but we have the ability, and have proven it over time, that we can innovate our way to excellence.
Thank you, Eve. Bryan.
I would say I would have to agree with Mr. Lindy that CPS, what they do well is that they have pockets of success. I mean, we have one of the best high schools in the country. And so that proves that we know how to educate kids. The sad part is that most of our kids are not getting the education that they need. And so when you think of obstacles, there's three that step out. One is the culture of the board. It is apparent that there are some struggles right now on the school board. You can see it in the board meetings. We need a board that can come together and speak with one collective voice so that this district can move forward. Another is that we have to develop policies that ensure that students, staff, community organizations, and businesses that do positive things are frequently celebrated so that excellence becomes a norm. And lastly, this great equity policy that has been written, we need to make that policy a reality. And we need to make sure that it is evident in the schools so that our 20,000 non-proficient students receive additional services so that they can become proficient. Thank you.
Great, thanks all. We have a few more questions for you tonight. So moving on to question 4. Please describe the role of the school board as it relates to managing the superintendent. Please describe what work is and is not within the board's purview. We will begin with Kendra.
So as it relates to the role of the school board, it's important to recognize that the role focuses on governance. And so it is the responsibility to hire the superintendent. It is the responsibility of the school board to make sure that there are accountability measures in place for the superintendent. And what I think is necessary for that relationship to work well is that there's a shared level of accountability, right? So ensuring that there's a delineation of roles so that there is not a power differential, and so that everyone can have that trust and that respect to ultimately work towards those successful student outcomes. I think that as it relates to the role of a school board member is offering that level of support as well, and developing and constantly having those conversations about what are the values that we want reflected, and ensuring that the superintendent is working and striving to implement those values that the community has talked about and has advocated for, pertaining to what they've shared with the district, that is reflected across our district as a whole. And so while there is a relationship that this board has to have with the superintendent, again, it takes the accountability and the support of everyone to ensure that we are working in those positive directions to, again, yield those viable, successful student outcomes. And as individuals have talked about on the panel, it's important to recognize that there has to be cohesion. If we are working together on what those overall goals are, what the vision is, there has to be alignment, and that has to be trickled down from the board to the superintendent, as well as throughout our district. And so I think that that is one key area that we need to make sure that we're leaning into.
Great, thank you, Kendra. Eve, you're next.
Well, the single largest, most important responsibility that the school board has, very frankly, is to represent the community in all of its variety and diversity, all of its challenges, all of its weaknesses and its strengths. That's the purpose of the board. That's why we've been elected since the beginning of the Northwest Territory. That's important because the community owns the schools. Nobody else does, and we represent the community. And in that role, we are the people that have to come together and have consensus, because we're not city council. We're not a group of individuals. We are a body of elected officials that have to, through consensus, find some unity. And then in that unity, we have the power as a board. We don't have power as individuals. And that is in part to oversee not only the superintendent and the treasurer, and we have a few other direct reports, but it is also to oversee, most particularly, that there is enough money available to us to educate our children. Nobody else has that responsibility, not the superintendent, not the treasurer. The board has the responsibility to make sure that there is enough revenue that our schools can function and teach our kids. And that's critical. And we also have the responsibility of oversight on any number of items, whether it be safety, whether it be transportation, the oversight of the budget, and the oversight and writing of our policies that guide the district's culture and vision. That's the role of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eve. Bryan.
So in general, all school boards have three major responsibilities: developing the annual budget to run the school system, setting and writing board policies, and hiring and evaluating the superintendent, and in our case, the treasurer. I think it's important for the board to make sure that they establish that working relationship with the superintendent by establishing guardrails for the superintendent, clearly showing the new superintendent what is the culture of Cincinnati and how do we get work done here in our city. But you got to know the city. You have to know your constituents to be able to do that. We have to make sure that we oversee the work of the superintendent by providing frequent feedback to our superintendent, and then also listening, making sure that our superintendent has what they need to be successful. Our job as a board is not to run the day-to-day operation of schools, but we do have to make sure that our vision and our collective agreements as a board and how the district will be run is passed down to the superintendent.
Thank you. Ben.
It's muted.
And we
Great.
need to, there we go.
This is a fabulous question, and I really do agree with a mix of what my three colleagues up here have shared. I think Eve had it right. That what the board does is represent the community. I think that is exactly right. I think the way we do that is very in line with what Kendra was saying and what Bryan was saying. The way we represent the community is we hire the superintendent who matches the profile of what the community is looking for. And we use what we hear from the community to help set some very clear goals and statements about our values that we use to evaluate the superintendent. I think that the challenge with any community-run organization like a school district is that it's really hard to run a 36,000 student organization, over $600 million budget organization, when there's so many different perspectives in our city and so many different parts of the community who want so many different things. And I think the way we best represent what the community wants is by choosing a leader and then holding that leader accountable for measurable progress on the issues that are most important to the community as a whole. And so I really think my other three colleagues here shared some very insightful ideas, and I really agree with pieces of what everyone said.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for your responses. This is very helpful. Understanding the role of the board and superintendent is so important to getting work done in our district. Now we will move on to our final questions. One job of a school district is to ensure our kids are safe at school. Across the country and here locally, there has been an uptick in disciplinary actions taken in schools since the pandemic. And there have also been incidences of violence near our schools, including gun violence. Talk to us about your ideas for how to ensure kids are safe at school, including your thoughts on whether or not to keep resource officers, which are specially trained Cincinnati police officers, in our schools. We will begin with Eve. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned about what does the board do, I did mention safety is one of those top three. Yes, I'm supportive of the resource officers. I'm also supportive of, now that we have created a 1 mile radius around all of our schools, both high schools and also neighborhood schools and magnet schools, and that 1 mile radius is the transportation radius, meaning within the 1 mile, we do not provide transportation, but beyond 1 mile, we do. And we've suggested that one of the things to do is to create and reestablish the concept of a school-safe zone of 1 mile. And I'm working with Councilman Scotty Johnson on this, and we've, I think, done some good thinking about it. So that's one thing. The other thing is to make that our buildings are safe and our buses are safe. But the other piece is to create a positive school culture where our children and our teens feel safe within the building to actually develop and share information with one another and share with their teachers. So you need both the cultural piece of safety and comfort and welcoming, but you also need that zone of safety that our children need. You know, we've had 2 different times when some of our students, or 1 or 2 of our students, have actually been shot. And where's the first place they go for help? Both instances in the last 2 years, they go to the school. They go to the school. They walk to the school to find help when they've been hurt. For our children and our teens, our schools must be the safest place they have. And then from that safety, we have to branch out, and we need the help of the city and the neighborhoods and the families.
Great, thank you, Eve. Ben, you're up next.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. I also support SROs, and it's a complicated issue because, you know, this is one where both sides really speak to me. The reason I've been supportive of keeping our SROs in schools is because when you ask the students and you ask the parents, and we've done focus groups on this, that's what they ask for. Not everybody, because people disagree, but that's what the broad theme has been when we've talked to the folks who are closest to this issue. On safety more broadly, I'll say 2 other things. I think there's some small things we can do that matter, right? We've passed a safe storage resolution at Cincinnati Public Schools that I'm proud of. We can make even more investments in mental health for students and for families and community learning centers. We can, strengthen everywhere we can the safety precautions that we have, the fidelity with which people follow those safety precautions. We can do all of those things. We should do all of those things. I say this both as a board member and as a parent of a student in CPS. So there is all of that. We should do those things. I'll just mention a last point, which is we need a new generation of voters who change our country's gun laws, because this is much like the issue around the madness coming out of Columbus. We live in a country whose interpretation of the Second Amendment is bananas. And we live in a state where the gun laws that get passed and the limitation on cities' abilities to pass different kinds of gun laws is bananas. And that needs to change, but that's only going to change with a new generation of voters. So I think there are great causes to support. Go vote. Let's get different elected representatives. But I think we need to do all of these things. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Kendra.
So I really love this question because this is what my platform is all about, making sure that our students and staff feel safe, secured, and valued. And safety across so many lines on the spectrum. And so when I think about safety, I think it's important that our policies actually translate and trickle down into the procedures and the reality of what's happening in the school. And so safety is focusing on making sure we have enough nurses, making sure that we have enough comprehensive mental health supports in place. And one of the things that I can say that I'm really proud of, actually through School Board School, I offered the pitch to ensure that we had comprehensive services and how to streamline that as it related to mental health. And so one of those things was focusing on having counselors work in a classroom setting to educate students on how to regulate emotions, how to support the teaching staff, being able to lean into those positive mindsets and behaviors, because we are experiencing a time that is very critical and very heightened. And ultimately, we are experiencing where I would say we're in survival mode. And so we have to have those foundational skills in place so that everyone knows how to establish and lean into supporting their culture of wellness. So that is something that I strongly support. Another thing is in terms of the physical safety. I know that we have been experiencing a critical shortage with nurses, and I personally had an experience that was very traumatic to me as a parent, where my child experienced a moment of having an allergic reaction. And I was not informed about it, but what I did, because it wasn't just about my child, I worked collaboratively with the school's administration to put procedures in place for all students. So we have to think about safety across the board. And then lastly, as it relates to SROs in the school, I do think that that is something that we should do, because it helps to build and establish relationships in the community and remove those implicit biases and learn how to work together.
Thank you, Kendra. Bryan.
So yes, I support SROs in the schools, but we also have to make sure that those SROs create relationships with students, and they're not just there as a authoritative figure. And there's ways that we can do that. Just recently at my high school, Mount Healthy, we were closed yesterday because of threats in our school. And so it's real and it's coming to Cincinnati, and we have to be ready. One of the things that I would make sure is that SEL services, like Kendra said, are increased. We need to make sure that we have counselors and social workers in the building, especially after COVID. Our kids come to school suffering, and we have to address those before we put any academics in front of them. And if we don't, you're going to have a kid going through the school day, because I see it on a daily basis, going through the school day in crisis or ready to pop off at any second. Next thing I would do is to make sure that the teachers create relationships with students. In my school, we have an advisory period every day where we have 20 minutes to talk to our kids non-academically, or sometimes academically if we're checking grades. But we're building relationships with our kids, because when the kids value the people that work for them, then they won't bring that violence to the school. We can teach them how to resolve conflicts. We also have to include our parents and make sure that they are an active part of our schools, making sure that they are in our schools on a consistent basis. There's one more thing, PBIS is Positive Behavior Intervention Systems. That's where you highlight the positive things that students and teachers are doing. You make sure that that's the norm. You make kids want to come to school, make sure they want to do the right thing so that they respect their school, they respect their teacher, they respect their classmates. And by PBIS, you can do that.
Thank you, Bryan. We're on to our final question. But thank you for, and we know that keeping our kids safe is on a lot of voters' minds. So it's helpful that we have heard from you tonight on your responses. Moving on to our last question. And remember, for this question, you'll each have just 1 minute for your response. We talked a lot tonight about what you believe needs to be changed or improved in CPS. But let's end our night with this question. What do you love most about CPS? We'll begin with Kendra. You have 1 minute.
What I love most about CPS is feeling a sense of community. One of the things that I absolutely value is being able to go to the different events that are occurring and that our parent champions make sure that is accessible. And so I attend those events with my own children, and I encourage other members of the community to attend. I think that helps to build the pride within our district, and really help to establish, again, that sense of community. So that is one of the things that I really value, and would love to continue to see happen throughout our district, because we are a collective. And when we have that overall pride, we will do well and we will be successful. So that is something that I truly value and appreciate.
Great, thank you. Bryan.
I would say the opportunity for success is key in Cincinnati. We've hired some new people in our district, and so the opportunity is endless. If we have a school board that is pushing an agenda for success and based off of student outcomes. If you ask in Cincinnati, where did you go to high school? That is the biggest question that people get in this city. And so the pride that people have in Cincinnati is probably one of its biggest assets. Go to one of the Friday night football games. Like, I'll be at Taft and Hughes tomorrow. I got to figure out what color shirt to wear, red or green. But that is the pride that you cannot take away, that stands above all or most other major cities.
Great, thank you, Bryan. Eve.
Oh, that's hard. As a native Cincinnatian, I think the thing I'm most proud of is that this district itself, as it approaches its bicentennial year, the district itself represents the broad, challenging, dramatic history of Greater Cincinnati itself. So I like that it is sort of, if you will, the artifact of the history of this town and the region. The other thing I really believe very strongly is that our capacity to innovate and our willingness to innovate and our willingness to try to not only innovate, but implement the innovation. It's remarkable and unusual, and we're known around the country for this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ben.
So the first answer I was going to give, but I'm not going to give, is that this is home. It's where I grew up. It's a place I care about deeply. The second answer I was going to give, but I'm not going to give, is about history. Because Cincinnati is the spot on the Underground Railroad that was the border between slave state and free state. And I think there's an incredibly powerful history here we don't talk about enough. The third answer is the answer I'm going to give, which is the diversity of CPS. There is so much that is here. We have white and African American and Hispanic Latino. We have people from all over the world coming to Cincinnati, and so many different languages spoken in CPS. This is a wonderful, wonderful place. And regardless of what happens in this election, I'm looking forward, I hope, to serving with many of the people in this meeting. And I'm very grateful to School Board School for putting this event together.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much to our candidates for joining us tonight. We know campaigning takes a lot of energy and commitment, and we appreciate the work that you are putting in service, to our community's children. We have a few more quick pieces of information before you go. First, we know you may have questions that you wanted to ask candidates. In fact, so did we. So we also sent them questions that they responded to in writing for our candidate guide. And you can find that on our website, and Maya is chatting that link now. Also, we know that historically school board elections have low voter turnout, and we hope to change that. School Board School launched an awareness campaign to make sure CPS voters know about the really important issues in the election and who's on their ballot. We really need your help spreading the word. Maya will chat in the link to a Google form where you can volunteer on this campaign doing 3 things. Knocking on doors will be out every Saturday and Sunday until the election, letting people know why it's important to vote down the ballot in this race, and we need your help. The second way that you can help us is writing postcards that we'll mail before the election. And third is working the polls on election day. Finally, every one of your voices is important, and we want to let you know about our region's first ever all-day education advocacy event. Advocate for Education Day. It's on next Saturday, October 7th, and it's a day to learn, grow your network, and take action. It's free, but space is limited, so register now. And Maya will chat that in the link, as well. Thank you to everyone in the audience who joined us. We hope that you feel more informed and prepared to vote in the upcoming election. Remember, you can vote for up to 3 candidates. And I'll say that one last time. You can vote for up to 3 candidates. If you have friends who missed tonight's forum, we'll have it posted on our website by Monday. So please spread the word. Again, thank you to our audience. Thank you to our candidates. Thank you to our partners, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.